Hello and welcome to another episode of the For the Record podcast. I'm joined by my good friend Axl to discuss this much beloved anime, Gurren Lagann. So after the past couple of years, I've slowly been dipping my toes in the anime juices, basing what I watch off a lot of your recommendations, and I finally got around to watching one of your all-time favorites in Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. So Axl, do you want to kick us off by talking about why you wanted me to watch this anime above so many others?
Sure. So I've been pestering you for quite a while, forcing you to watch Japanese animation
Not too
more and
long.
more. Not too long.
6 months. I actually checked. It was 6 months since you made me watch it, and it took you like 3 years to watch Breaking Bad. So fuck you.
You know what? I'm not even gonna argue that one. You deserve that one. You earned that one. But yeah. So slowly, I know your style of shows that you enjoy tend to lean more on the realistic side, but I personally find that anime and its hype and its fights and like a lot of its concepts, they really do it for me. And I think that since you've been watching some shows that are more realistic, it's about time you dipped your toes into the juices that are the big crazy mecha wars, type of shows.
Yeah. So what really stands out about Gurren Lagann to you? That's like, Bodhi has to watch this show. Like, why do I have to watch this show ahead of some of the other options that I had on my list from your recommendations?
Well, I think it's just built different, isn't it? It is a wacky show that if you I know you like realistic things, but I think it would be interesting to hear your take on a type of show that if you try to dissect it or if you have questions, those questions will be asked by characters in the story and they will look at the screen and say, don't think about it, I don't know, doesn't matter, fuck logic, like it literally, that's an actual theme of the show, and that's what makes it so interesting. And I really wanted to hear your take on it, and it's also one of my very highly personal favorites.
So I guess to kind of inform the audience a bit of a background on my like history with anime. So you've been nagging me for a while to try and get me into watching more anime. Like I'm a massive film buff, massive television buff, but anime was kind of like the missing Dragon Ball that I hadn't really conquered yet, right? Growing up, I watched anime like any kid born in the 90s. I was addicted to Yu-Gi-Oh! It was definitely like one of my favorite anime-esque shows, and my first exposure to it. Obviously, like Pokemon, bits of Dragon Ball Z. Never really got fully into them, but I definitely like watched them, on Saturdays and stuff like that. But in terms of like, being an adult and watching anime, I haven't really been exposed to much at all. Over like the last couple of years, we've slowly kind of watched a few shows together. I know you made me watch, I think Anohana was one of the first ones we watched, which was just a short little mini-series. I liked it, but didn't love it quite as much as you. We watched Steins Gate together, which was an anime that really stood out to me as something that I was probably gonna like, more than most others. And again, it was good, but didn't quite hit me with the ultra high levels of excitement. Didn't weepify me at all. And I watched Cowboy Bebop by myself. It's probably my favorite TV show, to be honest, anime TV show so far, at least. Really liked the unique kind of style of that, and can definitely see why it's like a classic in anime. But again, like I would probably only rate it like a 70 out of 100, and a lot of people really rate Cowboy Bebop to be a masterpiece. So far, I would say that like while I haven't disliked anything that I've watched, it's all kind of just been around that same level of it's good, but nothing special to me. And I was interested to see if Gurren Lagann would be the show that breaks my back and makes me become an anime fan. What about yourself, though? What do you want to give the audience a bit of a informative session about your history with anime?
Sure thing. Let's see. I started watching anime when I was in, what was I, like fifth grade, somewhere around there in my elementary school. One of my, playground mates introduced it to me, and it was Naruto. It was airing on Toonami, which is the late night block of cartoons, and I would stay up to watch it. And back then, watching anime was not cool. You know, you were unironically bullied. Everybody who, you know, grew up watching anime when they were younger knows this. You were the weird kid if you watched those Chinese cartoons.
I feel like it's changed a bit now, though, right?
Oh yeah, now it's mainstream. You see that everywhere. Now watching anime is cool, you know. I remember growing up, I was bullied for it, man. Like, times have changed, haven't they? But I grew up watching a lot of these shows. Naruto was my gateway, as the big three, as they're called, you know, Naruto, Bleach, One Piece. That was basically when we had the biggest wave of new anime fans here in the West. And Naruto's one that hooked me. It's not perfect, but, you know, has a special place. And from there, I kept exploring other shows that were coming out at the time. When I got to Gurren Lagann, watching this Japanese animated show, it really hit me like nothing has before or since, really, in a way. It's funny also because Hiroyuki Imaishi's latest work, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, you've seen that previously before. That's, I think, the one before you saw this one.
Yeah.
So I'm also curious to hear on, since you've seen his most latest work, I'm curious to hear what you think about this one, since this one's the one that really put him on the map. Well, you know, Studio Gainax was working on Evangelion before this. But this one, you know, it was a different flavor, a more positive take on the mecha genre.
Do you remember when you first, like, how old you were when you first watched this show?
Oh, yeah. I was in 6th grade when I watched this show. It was recommended to me by a friend of mine, and she had a huge crush on the main character, and she would just tell me about what a great show it was. And at this point, you know, I was sinking my teeth into any new show I could watch at the time. And they weren't much available. I had to sit on a LimeWire. I had to tell my dad to LimeWire and pirate anime episodes for me because I couldn't get a hold of them easy. When I watched this one, it absolutely blew me away because it was amazing and it makes no sense, but it doesn't try. It doesn't pretend to make sense. It doesn't care that it doesn't make sense. Yeah, it really left its impression on me. And I rewatch it around once every couple of years or so, and it's like the first time all over again.
Yeah, sick. Well, I remember us having a conversation like 6 months ago. Gurren Lagann was the top of your list in terms of favorite television shows of all time. Because of that, I went into this show with some pretty high expectations, but at the same time, like, I didn't fully know what to expect. Like, I had no exposure to this show at all. I didn't know anything about it. I knew, like, based off just the cover art, the poster, right? I knew that it was like a mecha anime. They're gonna be some robots or some shit. I obviously saw Cyberpunk Edge Runners, so I kind of figured it would be similar style in terms of that action. But outside of that, like, besides knowing it was 27 episodes long and it was your favorite anime, that's kind of all I knew going into it. Look, I like to go into things without having high expectations, because I feel like if you ever have, like, sometimes it's unavoidable, right? Like, if you, for example, watch, you know, something and then there's going to be a sequel coming out and you really love the first one, it's natural to only have, like, expectations. You can't really avoid that. But when I go into, like, watching stuff like this, I try and always just go in neutral. I don't like expectations kind of impacting my enjoyment, because I feel like if you have high expectations, you're setting yourself up for disappointment more often than not. Because it's not just you that loves this show. Like, this is one of the most beloved anime of all time. Like, I've done a little bit of research since. A lot of people have this in the S tier of anime shows. It's very, very well beloved. So it's not just you. Like, you're not alone in saying that this show is crazy good. So yeah, I went in, tried to keep my expectations under wraps a little bit. Look, I'll save my thoughts on it for a little bit later, but gonna blue ball you just a little bit longer. I'm interested to know, how many times have you seen Gurren Lagann? Like,
fuck me, man. I will at minimum of like 12 times. Damn. At least. It's something that, you know, since watching it in 6th grade, like, how fucking old was I? Like, probably, like, 11, 12. I rewatch it, like, once a year. A lot of my favorite things, like video games and anime, I like to rewatch once a year or so to remind me why anime is good and life is worth living.
When's the last time you watched Gurren Lagann?
The most recent time I watched it was actually last year, so I want to say around, 7 months-ish. So my memory on it is fairly fresh, so I feel confident just speaking about it.
Yeah, so I feel like you watched it probably around the time when you were, like, you first started recommending it to me, because I remember it kind of came out of nowhere. Like we were talking about anime, and you were giving me like some options of like, oh, what we should watch together. And then all of a sudden, like, Gurren Lagann just came out of nowhere, and you're like, oh yeah, this is my favorite show of all time. I'm like, bruh, where did this come from? Yeah, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the story and characters of Gurren Lagann. So I'm really interested to know, how do you rate the story of this show? Because to me, at least, it's not really a story-driven show, or even a character-driven show either. I'd say that it's more so like an action-based show, and it's more thematic than it is plot.
I was gonna say it's very strong on the themes. Yes, very much so.
When it comes to the story, like, I don't know, what do you think of it? Because for me personally, I think that the actual plot is something that like is probably a slight flaw of the show. I know it's not trying to have an ultra incredible like story, but
I was gonna say, I don't think the story is trying to be anything particularly, high bar setting, because it is, as stated before, and I think this is one of the things that makes it a little hard to critique things that know. It's kind of like the lampshading technique, They know it doesn't make sense, and they look at you and they give you a wink and they say, yeah, it doesn't make sense. We don't give a fuck. And that's what makes it awesome to me in that way. But it also makes it like, I know maybe not others have this opinion, but for me personally, when I watch things that are self-critiquing or self-aggrandizing, I always think to myself, if I say this is shit and the story knows that it's shit, and that's like the point, did it succeed at its goal? So, it's kind of a weird perspective. But yeah, anyway, I digress. The story itself, I would rate that more like a 7 out of 10. And I think that the poignant points it does get a little slow in the beginning of the second half, particularly. That's always been my least favorite part of this series. But I think the first half is very solid. And they could have ended the show there, honestly, after the first 15 episodes. But I think it's amazing to have that big time skip in the middle. It's a little bit slow, but I think that the ending to the show and the pacing up until that point, it's magnificent for me. It always gets me hyped up in my screen, just cracked out on adrenaline and screaming. And I think if a show can do that, even if the plot isn't quite there and doesn't make sense so hard that you could study it like a hard magic system, I don't really care,
Yeah, that's fair. See, we have very different views when it comes to like what we look for. I think you yourself, when it comes to like anime, you're very much about themes. You're very much about like how it makes you feel. And
emotion.
Yeah, and I think you appreciate anime action a lot more than myself. Me, when it comes, not just the anime, but things in general, I'm very big on plot and I'm very big on characters. Those two things for me, even in video games and stuff like that, like, I need a plot that drives me forward, thinking like I want to know what happens next, and I need characters that are vessels that I find interesting and that I care about. And for me, Gurren Lagann lacks both of those things, so it was quite it's quite different to what I would say I'm typically into. On the surface, like, it doesn't really tick a lot of the boxes that I guess criteria for me to really enjoy a show.
I said no earlier, but in all reality, it does make sense to me, which is why I didn't recommend you started with something so wacky and anime as this one. So yeah, I get it.
There are like aspects to like in terms of the plot, there are some cool moments. For example, I do really enjoy the pilot and like the beginning, how they're like this human kind of like city civilization, whatever. They're trapped underground, and there's like an oppressive leader or whatever, and then there's like that cool call to action, and then we see like the progression throughout the show. Like, these characters start underground with like the hope of reaching the surface, and then they hit the surface, and then we kind of have that like cool little exploration where they're learning about the world, and with the mechas and stuff, you have that big time skip and everything changes again. And the show actually concludes in the fucking stars, right? So we go from literally like underground to the stars. I think that's pretty cool, and it's very thematic in itself. Speaking of themes, like, what does the show mean to you? Because my interpretation of it personally is it's very like, there's big themes on like self-confidence, and obviously like the dynamic between Simone and Carmena's relationship, right, is like the impact others can have on your self-confidence and self-belief. And obviously Simone's character arc throughout, he goes from a boy to a man essentially, and goes from being very insecure to later becoming like a very confident leader. And
from simp to Giga Chad.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But yeah, like that's a huge theme. I think also like there's elements of depression and grief. I think Carmena's character, he's an orphan. Simone's character, he's an orphan. I think just the analogy of being underground as well, where things feel very helpless, and then digging yourself out of that hole, literally, right? I think it is is a big theme, and then like reaching the universe or landing among the stars, right? Like it's probably like a bit on the nose. It's probably a bit obvious, but I do think it is like a very cool thematic representation on a lot of those kind of issues, and I did appreciate that for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I, one of my favorite lines, right, is as you said, speaking of digging, right? They always say keep moving forward, one little turn at a time. The dreams of like of those who have fallen before us and the hopes of our future generations, the double helix. It's like, as you said, it's very, very on the nose, but it knows that. And I love that about itself. I think it's just absolutely adorable that the show and its characters and its story, right, they have this confidence to present you with ridiculous images of two giant robots throwing galaxies at each other like they were, shuriken ninja stars, and take it seriously in universe as like the battle for mankind. And it all started with a couple of like orphans underground digging holes to like eat like pig meal steak.
Yeah, that progression's probably one of my favorite aspects of the show. Like, say what you want about the show, but you can't deny that like a lot happens in these 27 episodes, right? Like, as you said, we literally kick things off with like two orphans underground finding this mecha head and a drill. I don't know what it's called, but like the drill necklace.
The core drill. Yeah, it's called the core drill.
And then to see like that progress over the course of the series to where things finish up, like it's pretty radical. I don't think there's many shows that have kind of had that kind of dramatic change. But I will say I did kind of enjoy like the first few episodes, like how simple and slow they were. Not too slow in terms of like pacing or anything, but they kept things like, they ease us into the world nicely. I think like the pilot introduces the characters and we get a feel for their situation and their dynamic, and then obviously once they hit the surface, we're kind of slowly introduced to the story world through like what are these like monsters that they're fighting, the different the mechas and stuff that exist in this story world, and then we're slowly introduced to like the cast of characters throughout those first like 6 or so episodes. And then from then on, once the show kind of finds its feet, things get a little bit faster. But I did kind of enjoy those, particularly those like first 3 episodes. Like, they were quite user friendly in terms of not being thrown into the deep end of like the story world, because Gurren Lagann is a weird show, man. Like it
is.
It is a hard pill to swallow for someone that's maybe not so much used to it. Like, you've got Carmena's character, who is literally unlike any other character I think I've ever seen. Like, he can only exist in the anime universe, right? He is not a character that could ever work in live action, but he's certainly very unique.
Yeah, in this world there's like gray pipples and just wacky animals, beastmen, mechas. As you said, I love the world building at the beginning too, because they believe they're earthquakes when they're living underground.
Yeah.
And then they go to the surface and they're a little more knowledgeable. All their mechas. And then they meet Viral, he exterminates humans who go to the surface, and you're like, yo, what the fuck is going on? Like, this was on purpose, And the world expands. And the first 3 episodes, I think, are the prologue to the series. That's your first act before we move into the new norm of our characters living on the surface. But I think it's kind of like a plane, They set it up, they build it up, and they take their time with the world. They don't rush it. But once the show, takes off, lands its pace and it takes off, man, does it just fly way into the stars. And then it keeps going. It doesn't stop. It doesn't know when to stop. I love that about the show. And show me another show where another character grabs another planet and chucks it at the enemy like a dodgeball.
Yeah, well, look, you can say a lot of things about Gurren Lagann, but one thing you can't critique is just how creative and original it is. Like, it's seriously one of the most original kind of thing. Well, maybe not original. That might not be the best word, but it's very creative, right? Like, it may borrow a lot from, say, like, I think there's obviously a pretty big inspiration from Neon Genesis.
Yeah, same studio.
Yeah, but like the story world here, it's incredibly unique, right? It's science fiction, it's post-apocalyptic almost. I think the science fiction elements kind of come in a fair bit more like later on. It's obviously like a mecha anime, and it's very unique in terms of like its style, and it's definitely like dialed up to 11, right? And kind of keeps that
11, more like 15.
yeah. Yeah,
it just breaks the scale. And it's funny you say sci-fi, because although, you know, there is a lot of techie space stuff, there is nothing science in this fiction. It's just all, you know, through the power of belief, things just work out.
I think the moment for me that I recognized that this show was just batshit fucking insane was when that episode where they were hungry and they need to be not hungry to fuel their mechas or whatever. Kind of confused by that, but then he eats like the the fucking the tail or whatever of the
Buddha.
Yeah. Dude, like as soon as I saw that, I'm just like, what the fuck were these people on when they made this?
I wouldn't be surprised if they were high when they made this, because they're like, bro, have you ever noticed DNA in the universe are like a spiral, like a drill? Yeah, the mechas run on willpower in this universe.
Yeah.
So if you're not confident, it literally just won't fucking turn on.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's quite hard for me to kind of get used to that because I'm pretty big on logic in a lot of movies as well. Like, I like to critique, you know, things like plot holes or character decisions and motivations, the way the universe works. But Gurren Lagann doesn't really have any logic to it. So I was kind of a bit lost at like, what the fuck do I do? Because nothing really made all that much sense. It kind of just like, you know, especially with the later episodes as well, it kind of just explains everything away with like, oh, it's just spiral stuff.
The music is like, you know, do the impossible, see the invisible.
Yeah.
Fight the power.
But yeah, like I'd say the show can kind of be distinctly split up into like 3 acts. The first act being like that episode 1 through 8 run, right? Where that big event happens, then things change. Heading into this, like I said with the expectations, I was kind of expecting like a reasonably consistent show given how much it's loved, but there are some pretty bad episodes.
I agree.
I think after the time skip, the show's pace literally like stops dead, and it's kind of like a show that relies on its pacing a fair bit. Like, it's very much action orientated and quite insane, but the show's pacing just falls off a cliff after that time skip, and a lot of those episodes immediately after that really suffer. I know I personally like wasn't engaged throughout a lot of them. In that first act as well, like I think episode 4, the one where they like set off to face Spiral, that episode was pretty mediocre. There's an episode that provides like just backstory. It's like a whole like weird backstory of, it's like a compilation episode or something, right? I think it's like midway through the series.
16. I think it's episode 16 is those are recap episodes. Yeah, those are recap episodes. A lot of anime typically have that after a core or a season. Yeah, so that's pretty normal for some anime. I don't know if they do them so much anymore. I think they still do. And it's funny you mentioned episode 4. I believe one of those episodes, like 4 to... I think it was 4. It was done by a different studio. So I always remember how jarring the pacing and even the art style. If you pay attention, the art style changes for this one episode. So that one's always been like a black sheep for me. So I'm not at all surprised that you didn't like that one. And also among the community, after the part 1 ends and, you know, the time skip, the character of Rossiu is probably the most hated character. And that whole, you know, section of the story, rebuilding, you know, the world post time skip is very much, you know, consistent with my own beliefs and a lot of the fan base around the show. So it makes sense.
One episode I actually didn't mind was the episode where we're introduced to Rosu in that like underground village, and we kind of got like that element where they're like, oh, the population can only be this number, and they have to like sacrifice. Like I actually liked that episode because it reminded me a lot of like Fallout. It felt like one of the Vault
Like a vault,
stories.
yeah.
So I quite enjoyed that episode, to be honest, and I do kind of like those self-contained episodes that deal with like a specific kind of issue. Gurren Lagann in general doesn't. Well, it definitely has that early on, but then it becomes more of like a serialized show, I guess.
It's definitely not like a show like a Cowboy Bebop. That one you can kind of jump around, except for like 8 episodes that progress the story.
Yeah.
But the other two, like 15, 20, you can just jump around. And I do like some of the beginning ones. I know which one, the hot spring one. Every fucking anime has like the beach or hot spring episode. So that was pretty typical.
Another episode that I really didn't like was I forget which one it was, but it was when Nia was like introduced, and they're like the first section of the episode they're like playing on a beach. That episode was terrible. I'm sorry, but I wasn't a fan of that one at all. But I will say about Gurren Lagann is, although it might not have that consistent quality of like episode to episode, like say a Breaking Bad or whatever, where no episode is bad. Gurren Lagann does have some pretty high peaks to make up for those rather slow episodes.
Oh yeah, the ending of part 1, so episode 15. Particularly, that's a pretty high peak for me in terms of the scale. It's not like nothing we've ever seen at that point. And then they move on to part 2, and they're like, oh, we can top that. And then by the last 3 episodes, every time you think they can't go any crazier, they can't top this, they just break the ceiling and keep going above and beyond.
Yeah, so this show is like an ensemble cast, right? I have to say that for an ensemble show, it doesn't do a great job at developing its characters. I think Simone clearly has like the most effort and development, being the protagonist, and he goes on like a very obvious character arc from beginning to end, and has some interesting kind of issues that he has to face throughout. So no issue with Simone's character, but some of the other characters, I'd have to say, like a lot of the more minor characters did get on my nerves a fair bit. Like I didn't really care about characters like Leron, for example, or Budget Kamina, I forget his name, but the guy that's very similar to Kamina with the sisters.
Kitan?
Yeah.
It's funny because Steve Bloom voices Lyra. And I always loved him, but just for the quick gags, he does. He doesn't have much development, but I think he's just there for those jokes.
Yeah, he's definitely a comic relief character, and there's a few moments that I thought were quite funny. In general, a lot of the humor doesn't really land for me. Like I was looking up, trying to gauge like a bit like what people like about the show, and one thing a lot of people universally said was lovable characters and great humor. And for me, I'd have to disagree strongly with both. I think the humor's fine. It's like it's a fun, easygoing show, but it's nothing like overly funny for me, or I'm not highly engaged by like which funny situation are these characters going to get into next. It's more so just like an easygoing show. I wouldn't say it's overly comedic or funny. And then in terms of like the lovable characters, I have to disagree with that one. Like the characters again, they're easygoing, not a lot of depth to them. A lot of the minor characters for me were completely forgettable. Kamina as a character did get on my nerves a little bit.
I will say this. Some of the ensemble cast, I can name a couple of them. There's like Makin, Kitan, obviously, and his sisters, Kid Knuckle, the Jorgen twins. They're there, and they have like a scene or two, but, you're right. They don't do much because, Simone's hugging all the character development.
Yep.
And
the guy that just fucking presses the button, like to fire the missiles, and that's literally his whole character.
Oh, yeah!
Like, what the fuck?
Fires the missiles, just... You don't like pushing red buttons that shoot missiles?
No, I can't say I do.
Well, you obviously haven't tried.
But I guess Nia's character had a bit of development, but I also found her to be quite obnoxious and annoying. Her voice is just a bit too high-pitched, and her, like, ultra innocent kind of vibe, it felt like a bit stereotypy to me, but...
Did you watch it in English or Japanese?
I watched it in English at your recommendation.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I much prefer to watch anime in English unless it's like a notorious case of like a bad dubbing. I have watched anime in the past in Japanese, like a few episodes here and there. A lot of like feature films, like Miyazaki films. I do prefer English just simply because I'm allowed to appreciate like the visuals a lot easier than having to read the subtitles, and it's a lot more accessible. But yeah, I found like some of the voice acting to be maybe a little bit annoying. Like Carmena's character, he's so over the top, and I can see the charm in that. Like I can see why people might like him, and he is like a unique, interesting character, I guess. Like he's just got so much self confidence and self belief in himself, and how he kind of rubs off on Simone and their dynamic. Like that was an aspect of the show I really liked. But Carmena's character, like so many of his actions are just completely reckless, and he never really gets called out on it at all. I guess he eventually like suffers the consequences.
He kind of does get called out, but rewinding back a little bit, you were saying earlier how we're talking about the English voice acting, and I think that this show has one of the best dubs for English voice acting in come on, who doesn't like the gay Spike Spiegel? I think he does a really great performance of this character, and I feel like he just wanted to have fun with it. A lot of the screams, I judge a lot of voice acting based on how well they can do the screams. You can tell everybody's having fun in the booth is what I'm trying to get at.
Especially with Simone's voice actor, I think.
Yeah, they're screaming their lungs out, giving it their all. Yuri Lowenthal, that's the main character for Simon. I love the way he goes from like the timid shy guy and then evolves. You can feel that confidence. He's saying it with his chest more and more. It's amazing.
So going back to Carmena, like his character's kind of cool. I like the aspect of him trying to reach the surface. Like he's got that internal goal of like wanting to find his father, and then he finally like reaches the surface and then finds his father's remains, which is super convenient, by the way. But his reaction to that was rather interesting, like he portrays himself as very invincible with his self-confidence, and then he has that moment where he finds his father's remains, but then he continues to push on and kind of doesn't really let it affect him. I guess that was kind of interesting, right? It's kind of like him putting on a mask. Like generally situation like that, you'll have the character like very overtly react, with emotion, but I guess befitting of his character, he kind of just soldiers on and puts on a mask and doesn't really let it get to him too much.
I think, as you were saying earlier, that's really in line with one of the themes of the show, which is keep moving forward. And sooner or later, we come to learn that Kamina, he kind of knows that a lot of the situations and the things he's saying aren't accurate. It's definitely a portrayal, a little bit of a facade,
for sure,
to inspire others. But when it does and he works out, they all start to believe in themselves more and more, and he has that effect on people, and that in turn makes him believe in himself. And he tells Simon, I love the line, it's a bit dumb, but he's always saying believe in the me that believes in the you.
Yeah.
To inspire others to press on before eventually, letting them kind of like grow their own self-confidence to the point that he doesn't need to believe in them if they believe in themselves.
Yeah.
Which, again, I love that message.
Me too. I think that theme's probably my favorite aspect of the entire show, to be honest. It's really only prevalent in like the first 8 episodes. It kind of focuses on like other things a bit more later on. That dynamic between Simone and Kamina is fantastic, and I really do love that thematic message. But let's talk about the animation, because I don't really care too much for animation quality. Like as long as it's not bad, I'm happy. But I can definitely appreciate like stunningly beautiful animation. I personally wouldn't go as far to say that Gurren Lagann has like beautiful animation, but I do enjoy the style.
Yeah, it was animated by Gainax in like 2007 when it came out, and honestly, I think it holds up amazingly. And I
for sure
love even if the animation itself sometimes isn't the super high frame counts per action sequences, the art direction and the art style and the way they shift the perspectives with the Giga drill break, whenever they do those crazy moves, the camera work. I love when they would blow up, enemy mecha, and it would zoom out to show you the scale of the explosion, and it would keep zooming out in succession, and you're like, whoa, I thought the scale of it was huge, and the camera just pans out more and more to show you, oh, that was a big fucking explosion,
But yeah, a lot of the action sequences are well animated, I'd say. it's not really something that like watching a show that I'm like overly critiquing, but I will say, while it doesn't blow me away, I think the animation in general is quite solid. But one question I did have for you was, why is anime so horny? Like, like what's going on with Yoko's character design? Like, all of the character designs are pretty cool. Like, they're all very unique in terms of like visual appearance, so you can differentiate them easy. Like Simone being like a really small and like wimpy kind of kid, at least to begin with. He grows up a bit, but and Carmen and Carmen obviously being like taller and contrasting that, but like Yoko's character is just flat out insane. She's got huge tits, the skimpiest uniform I've ever seen, and a sniper rifle that's bigger than her.
Bro, you don't understand. In the lore, actually, it says that she has to wear those skimpy clothes that reveal her body because she needs the mobility to carry her big ass gun or something. I don't know.
I'm not fucking buying that, dude. I'm sorry. That is the absolute weakest attempt at trying to.
I think that's the in-canon reason. I'm pretty sure. Like, I don't know if they say that in the story, or for one of the, maybe Imaishi said it himself. But that is a direct quote that it's because her gun. Have you played Metal Gear Solid 5?
No, I haven't.
There's a character there. Her name is Quiet, and she also wears a bikini. And the director Hideo Kojima says, I'm not sexualizing her, and when you find out why she's so scantily clad, you're gonna feel bad. And then they find out that it's because she has a disease where she has to like breathe through her skin or drink water through something like that. It's fucking weird. They'll try to justify it one way or another,
Yeah. That's just the biggest like grasping at straws reason to like they write this whole fucking character arc about this medical condition just so they can be horny.
Men will do anything to justify being horny.
Yeah, like I don't really see why like showing basically her whole tits as a reason to carry around a sniper rifle, like, bro. And some of even if you're gonna justify her outfit, some of those fucking camera angles, man, they're getting pretty fucking sus. Like some of the positions that she finds herself in, like the bending over, bro. I don't know, man.
I watch Gurren Lagann for the plot. Hey, at least we get some male, fan service in there too. Kami and Simon are basically shirtless the entire show.
That's fair, but that's just because they're orphans and can't afford a shirt.
Oh, yeah. Look, honestly, I'm gonna keep it real with you. Anime is very horny, and I don't know why. I think it's just because in Japan, sexual liberation is very, very different than here in the West.
Yeah, it's definitely very weird for like someone who's maybe not so much used to that kind of stuff in anime. Like, I don't know, it's very weirdly sexualized but also childish, and it's a weird combination for me. Like when I watch like movies and stuff, if I'm getting that kind of like intense sexualization, it's usually in like a very adult movie. Here I'm getting like
it's not mature content, it's immature content.
Yeah, I'm getting like childish action, and even the approach to like the sexualization is very like it's done by like it's like asking like a 13-year-old kid to design a female character, like big tits, big ass, huge fucking sniper rifle, and bends over a lot.
Will it make it worse if I told you she's only like 15?
Oh boy, don't tell me that.
Yeah, no. Look, Japan has I don't feel like I can defend this, but I'm not, and I don't plan to either. It is very weird. It is all the characters in anime are always busty. There's a lot of fan service. Sometimes it actively detracts from the show that I'm watching. And the older I get, the weirder that age discrepancy gets.
Yeah.
Because there's so many shows set in fucking high school. But it's a cultural thing, and I don't think that you calling it out is abnormal or in any way. I think it's well within your right. I think I'm just desensitized because I've been watching anime for over 10 years that I get it. So from a newcomer's perspective, it makes complete sense that this would be a turnoff, or at least something that's like, yo, what is this?
Yeah, well, it seems to be super commonplace in like pretty much every TV show I know, even from watching like
Yep.
say Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, even though they're extremely heavily censored, the English dubs, they still have those like female characters like Misty, you know, even in Yu-Gi-Oh, like some of the like monster designs are pretty sus, like the harpies and stuff. But I've noticed that it seems to be a thing in anime television, but in at least the feature films that I've seen, it isn't a thing. There's not really any sexualization whatsoever in any of the anime that I've seen that are like feature length. But when it comes to like television, it seems to be like a completely different vibe. Can you like, is there an explanation for that, or have I just not seen enough like movies to see that?
No. What you're saying, it makes sense, but also Studio Ghibli and like the Miyazaki films they're definitely a different audience that they're reaching for, you know?
That's true.
Because, you know, they have coming of age stories, but they're
universal.
Yeah, exactly. But they're coming from a different angle.
Yeah.
You know, the Gurren Lagann is clearly, it wants you to scream, "Fuck yeah!" as, you know, giant robots are boxing each other in space. You know, it's like the Rock'em Sock'em robots on a grander scale. Whereas the Miyazaki movies are, you know, they're like the Disney. I know that somebody's gonna kill me for saying that. They're more like Disney movie where they want to appeal to everybody, not just horny male 15-year-olds or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a difference, you know. It's just a difference in their audience and what they're trying to do. But I get it, because a lot of like the Mamoru Hosoda films and things like that, you're right, they are less sexualized. But I think it's also because, you know, they're going for a different kind of audience.
It's probably like a big problem for me in terms of like, I guess anime, it's certainly becoming like a lot more mainstream. Like as you were saying before, you know, it's kind of cool to watch anime now, and a lot of people do it. But I feel like these kind of like, you know, like sexualizing teen girls and stuff, it's not necessary. And if they didn't do it, the quality of the show would probably be higher. I guess it depends on the situation. I'm not necessarily like critiquing Gurren Lagann for it, even though it did bother me like a little bit. Like Yoko's character just kind of felt like she was only there for her skimpy appearance and didn't really... I guess she had like some moments. Like I kind of like how later on she becomes like a teacher.
Nia. Yeah, she saved Nia that one episode too.
Yeah, like... yeah. Those kind of aspects were kind of cool. I did like the romance as well with Kamina, even though it lasted for 1 minute. But
have you noticed she has the kiss of death? Everyone that kisses her dies.
Yeah, that's just like true for all women.
That's just, no.
The downfall of a good man.
Not the misogyny.
Well, blame the show, because look how they represent Yoko. Yeah, I feel like it does kind of like detract a little bit from the show, and personally it's not something like maybe if I grew up watching anime I'd be desensitized to it like you, but I don't know, I feel like it feels like it's just trying to appeal to like 13-year-old boys a bit too much, and as a non-13-year-old boy it is a bit cringe.
Oh, as a 13-year-old boy, when I watched it, let me tell you, nothing like it hit, you know. But yeah, you know, it makes sense, and I get it.
What did you think of like the music and score in Gurren Lagann?
Oh, I loved it. I can play one of the songs on the keyboard. It's called Liberame from Hell. It's a very weird score.
The ending song?
No, it's it comes up during epic moments. It starts in the they show it throughout the show, but
okay.
The most prominent use of it is in the last episode, the first 5 minutes of the last episode.
Yeah.
The opening is amazing. I think everybody knows that. The second ending, the Mina no Peace by Afromania, is probably my favorite song from the soundtrack, but there's tons of music in there that I really love, and a lot of it is bangers. What did you think of it though?
It's all pretty solid. I think you'd have to watch it multiple times to really get that like, you know, connection with the soundtrack, or at least listen to the soundtrack separately. But there's one particular like musical score that plays like nearly every single fucking episode. It's just the really simple strings that play over like a dramatic moment, and it's repeated like so frequently throughout, and I really appreciated that as well. It was really simple, but it effectively like was able to like act as this, okay, when the score plays it's like an emotional moment or a somber moment for the show. And yeah, and like the rest of the soundtrack was pretty solid as well.
If you tell me you never got absolutely fucking hyped when they're losing a fight and the guitar of the from the intro pops in, you're going to hell for lying. Every time they play that opening song during a fight, you knew the bad guys were fucked. They're like, oh, it's going down. I love that stuff, man. Every time they play that opening song, I think that's like an anime trope when they play the opening song during like the last episode or like the final fight. It always gets me unbelievably hyped. I like lean in my chair, get closer to the screen, like, oh, what's going on? Anyway, I've been wanting to transition during this entire show and its run. Who is your favorite character and why is it Kamina?
It's not Kamina, I can tell you that. I didn't like Kamina. I thought he was an interesting character.
Wrong answer.
Fuck you. No, I thought Kamina was an interesting character. Like, he's certainly original and unique, but I found him to be a bit obnoxious, and it kind of felt like every episode was the same thing with him. It'd be like, you have to believe in yourself, and then next episode, you have to believe in yourself, and it was like very repetitive in that regard. So yeah, like, I don't dislike his character that much. I can see some people like really hating him. I thought he was just like, he was unique and interesting, but didn't overly do much for me. I more so appreciated his value to like Simone's character and just his value to like the story as well. So I don't know, I'm kind of in the middle with him. I'd say he's like an okay character, but I did find it kind of problematic how like he did so many reckless things but never kind of really acknowledged it, you know? I don't know. It would have been kind of cool to see like if his actions got someone else killed, but I guess he
got him killed, didn't it? Or Simon did too, to a point.
Yeah, but no, my favorite character would be Simone. I think he's the only character that really kind of has any care and development into him consistently. Other characters do have their moments, like Nia does undergo a bit of an arc, but more so for plot reasons, I guess. But Simone's character for sure is interesting. I did find him to be a little bit wimpy and annoying in the beginning. Like, I know it's the point, but it still made him like a bit annoying. But once he grows up, he's certainly a cool character. I like the way he holds himself. Yeah, when he gets arrested and stuff, like, that shit's cool. He has a good energy, good development. I like how we spend a fair bit of time with him trying to, like, overcome his grief with Kamina's death as well. I think that's probably, like, the most real part of the show is, like Gurren Lagann is a show, right? It literally sets itself up to be, like, this fun adventure type show. We're introduced to Simone and Kamina, and they're going to be the two bros that carry us out throughout the entire show. Kamina's death kind of like flips the script a little bit. It was definitely unexpected for sure, and I think it was a really cool plot element to kind of have, and for that reason it made Simone's character like so much more engaging for me. So I'd actually say that he is my favorite character. But what about yourself? Like, who's your favorite character? Kamina, I assume?
No, I was actually joking, because as much as I love Kamina, I agree with you all the way.
Yeah,
Simone just gets the best development, in my opinion, better than some other Gainax protagonists that I will not name. I just love the way it starts and his coming of age story. Because that's kind of like the heart. He's the heart of the story.
For sure.
And if his arc didn't work, I don't think the show would work, period. Regardless of like how things, went. Because I saw it when I was, very young and impressionable. I'm 13 years old and, transitioning from, elementary school or, primary to secondary high school. It just really hit me during that transitionary period of my life as well. And I was able to connect with him more and more, and just watching him, go from a wimpy kid that doesn't want to do anything. And he needs the, shall we say, crutch of Kamina's believing in him for him to get anything fucking done, because otherwise he'll just freeze up. I'll go as far as to say he pissed me off a few times at the beginning of the show, because he's just a whiny baby. I would scream at my PC or computer like screen. I was get up, pussy, like do something. It was so upsetting. I get that too, because that's just how things are sometimes. You need that confidence, and to watch his brother, because they called each other bro, despite them not being blood related, because it didn't matter that, a lot of the shows, it doesn't fucking matter. I don't care, you're my brother, blood related or not. And to have that ripped from him, and with him gone, so does everyone's belief in him, because he was kind of like the de facto next in line to be the leader. But Kitan went ahead and took it because Simone just, he wasn't ready for it. He wasn't prepared to take on that role until he started believing in himself. And I think just that arc of him going through that grief and finding Nia and getting over Yoko not being into him, and just dealing with all the rejection and loss, and growing up into an absolute badass that he becomes.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I appreciate that too. I do like the message about how like people can rub off on you, like how Kamina had such a profound impact on his own self-confidence and personality, that even when Kamina dies, that part of him that he rubbed off on Simone like continued on. And then also like seeing that struggle with like Simone trying to fucking deal with that, and then having that moment, like I think in one of the episodes he's like, my bro would believe in me or whatever, and then he that helps him get through like a situation. And I definitely like that aspect. And even Nia like rubbing off on him as well, like their relationship didn't really do much for me, to be honest, but I do appreciate at least the value it brings to his character again as like a second Kamina. Different kind of situation, but like you said, like getting over Yoko not being into him and the impact that she kind of has on him, I did quite enjoy.
Yeah, and I think Kamina's, send off in the show was very adequate because, as you said, not only does it kind of like throw you in for a loop, but I feel like it's just before he optimally would have gotten more time with his team and for Simone to be more well-rounded before they kind of took off the training wheels and said, you're on your own. One of my favorite lines and parts, not my favorite, but one of them is his dying words are, don't believe in the me who believes in the you. Don't rely on me. Believe in the you that you believe in. And that's a very long, convoluted way of saying, you don't need my belief in you and my trust. Like, you need to carry yourself. Yeah. And he knows he was going to die. So that's his final message to him. And Simone, eventually he does, but that's easier said than done, isn't it? Just the concept of loving who you are and believing in yourself. You got to have a little bit of an ego for that too.
Well, one of the things I actually didn't like about the show that I think is probably like the biggest defining reason why I don't like this as much as like the general populace that rate the show as one of their favorites, is I don't like the action. And this is an action-based show. I'm not saying I dislike it, but I have some problems with it. So firstly, like I do find the concept of like these people in mechas fighting each other using like their willpower and stuff. I don't, it's not for me, right? I can understand why people appreciate it and like it, but for me personally, that's not overly something I'm into. Like I'm open-minded and I'd never watched like a mecha-based anime or anything like that before, but based off this experience, like, I don't know, I thought it was kind of, I won't say lame, but it's a bit silly, I guess, for me. And one big problem I had is like all of the action sequences, although they're well animated, I'd say that they're a bit one note in terms of the way they play out. Like usually they'll start off, things are going kind of poorly, and then they muster up the courage to turn things around. And then that's just rinsed and repeated like throughout the entire show. You have like these weird moments like where they eat the fucking hamster thing or whatever it is to gain enough power to power the mecha. You have that I got really sick of as well, like every time they were just in like a dire situation, they would just fucking shove that little drill thing in and then all of a sudden the problem was solved.
Just turn it harder.
Yeah. It seemed like there was just basically like a lot of contrivances, a lot of like plot armor. There was no like realism with the action sequences, right? Like when you're watching like two characters have a sword fight, for example, you can very clearly define like who's on top and the kind of strategy behind it. But with these kind of like mecha fights, it just felt like it was all kind of random, and then all of a sudden the good guys would turn out a drill and then they'd win. And it makes no sense as well because you have fucking instances earlier on where like they turn the drill or whatever and they just the mecha grows like a couple of drills, right? And then fucking later on they literally like there's thousands of fucking drills like protruding from them. I don't know, it's
because they combined. The manly willpower. You're talking about a show where they shove a head into a robot and give an epic speech as a volcano explodes.
Yeah.
In the background, then they throw their sunglasses that multiply into more sunglasses. Like, why the fuck is there sunglasses on a mech, by the way? And then they pull out a giant drill and like fuck up the enemy robot.
Yeah, it's not like, meant to make sense. Like I'm very aware of that, but I'm saying that I don't like that aspect. Because
and that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. And I think you're not wrong for enjoying more
grounded action. Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
into. I can't even watch action movies anymore. Like growing up as a kid, I probably would have liked this show if I watched it when I was like 10. But growing up as a kid, I was into like action war movies, right? And my standards were kind of low, so I'd watch like dumb action movies that didn't really make that much sense, or whether the fucking protagonists were just invincible beings of death, and I'd be engaged by that. But upon growing up, I really need my action to be like super grounded and realistic. I really appreciate instances where like the protagonist isn't invincible, or when they get out of situations, it's for like logical reasons. But in Gurren Lagann, I feel like there's a lot of instances where it's just like, oh, I remember that I need to be more confident, and then I'm going to turn this around, or I'm just going to turn this drill harder and I'll turn things around. And there's a lot of like Deus Ex Machina moments. And for me, it kind of took the engagement out of the action sequences. For me personally, I know a lot of people can kind of like just watch it mindlessly and be entertained by the spectacle, and that's totally fair. But for me personally, I'm not entertained by that, and I found it quite hard throughout the entire series to be engaged, because I'd say maybe like 20-30% of the show is built around these action spectacles, and when they kind of feel just like they feel a bit random in the way they play out, I had lost engagement for that, and that was one of the big detracting factors for me personally.
Sounds like you just need to believe in yourself more.
Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to bring up before we end the show is, what did you think of the ending?
I think the ending's like really solid, but if you don't like the show, you don't care for the ending. So even though I appreciate like the fucking batshit insanity of what was unfolding before my eyes and the visual spectacle, by that point I was kind of just over it and just wanted it to finish. Like I was most engaged with the Carmenar and Simone relationship, and then once that kind of like finished, I felt like I was just plugging along for the sake of it. As I've mentioned, like character and story are really big for me, and the whole like spiral story element didn't really land for me. Like I didn't really care. It felt a bit random, and the actual like insanity of like the action sequences, again, like I felt kind of problematic. I really needed like some story beats or character moments to latch onto. I guess the coolest that it kind of got was like, I don't know, I felt like a bit wore down by it. I can understand why like a lot of people would say like the finale or the last few episodes are just fucking epic, but I think you have to be like a fan of the show by that point to really get much out of them.
Yeah, I would say I agree. And one thing that I do kind of think is a little undercooked is the anti-spirals and the whole concept of evolution and not having changed, staying in a state of just trying to stop all the entropy and like staying in stasis so that they don't evolve past the points where they kill themselves based on like the constant progression. And I think that concept in and of itself is fucking amazing. And I do wish they would have explored that as thoroughly. But I think that's a really good plot, especially with Lord Genome, in the way that he was portrayed as like the big bad at the beginning.
Yeah.
And once they topple his regime, they find out that he was actually like a fallen hero who was trying to protect them in a sick, twisted way, because he knew that there was worse things out there. And then the anti-spirals would just stop the human race from progressing. And I love one of the lines Simon says at the end, where they say that just moving forward without any hints of remorse is like the human spirit's limitation. And Simon retorts, no, that's your limitation, to think you can just control us. And again, for me, just screaming at the top of my lungs, staring at the screen TV going, let's fucking go. And nothing can ruin that for me, I don't think. So I agree with everything you say in that the logical aspect isn't there, but I think Imaishi and his crew would all look at you and say, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but it's just a different taste. I get that
for sure. And one thing I will say, like, I really like how Gurren Lagann isn't predictable. It doesn't really go along this like set path. Like Carmena's death is a big shock and twist. There's obviously like the whole situation with Nia is kind of unique as well. Them killing like the series antagonist with like 8 episodes to go or 10 episodes to go, and the way that kind of unfolds, having like that big 7-year time skip. Like, the show mixes things up quite regularly, and it is very creative, so I have to give it props for that.
What did you think of them killing Nia during the wedding?
At the end? Yeah. It felt like a little bit, I don't know, like going against a lot of the themes that it was kind of bringing up.
You think so?
I think so a little bit, but I guess it makes sense. Like, Simone's reaction to it was, it was like, that's the completion of his arc. How how he was kind of just like accepting of it. Like before, it would have destroyed him, like with Commoner, but his reaction to it was, you know, very befitting of like his character arc. What did you think of it?
The first time I ever watched the show, I hated it because I just wanted my boy Simone to be happy with his wife. Obviously, like he worked so hard, he got so far,
In the end, it didn't even matter. Yeah,
I think the older I get, the more I appreciate the ending. It's not that I ever hated it, but I like it now. Now I love it. Now I think it's wonderful, and it's so good that another animated series try to copy it. I won't say it just in case. I think it's very beautiful and bittersweet.
Yeah,
because you know we're all on limited time, and you know it shows the nature of human beings and the willpower and the we shall prevail. This too will pass. Like.
Certainly more interesting than just like your typical happy ending.
Yeah, and he gives away the drill, and he just kind of fucks off and lives his life as a nomad wandering. It's planting flowers. I think that's absolutely beautiful because during the epilogue, it's always leaves a little tear in my eye to see a thing they would always say throughout the show is like, who the hell do you think I am? Yeah. As a show of their strength or their toughness. And at the end, when he's roaming around, he finds a little kid and he shows him that he's good at using the drill to like open a coconut or something. And he's like, thanks, mister. And he's like, of course I'm good at it. Like and then he just kind of stops and he's like, yeah, I'm nobody. And he looks up at the legacy he left behind, because to him that's enough. He did his part. Yeah. For the human race to advance. Then it's very humble. It's a very humble, beautiful ending that I think reflects a lot of the message of the show itself, and how at peace he was, even on the surface it looks like he's lost it all. Yeah. It's like one of those stupid quotes of like, oh, don't be sad that Nia died. Be happy that it happened.
Yeah. I agree, like, on paper, it's really solid, but from, like, a personal point, I didn't really care about their relationship. Wasn't overly invested in it, so it didn't really land for me, but I think for, like, fans of the show, it's definitely, on paper, like, it's a really solid ending.
Alright, so, out of 27 episodes, which one of those was your favorite?
Look, there's a few contenders, but for me, I think the episode that was most interesting to me and my favorite would be episode 8, Later Body, where Kamina dies.
Yeah.
So, like I've mentioned before, like, the show sets itself up as being this, like, bro kind of adventure, right? Between these two characters. Not even a third of the way through the series, one of them dies. And even during that episode, like, he gets injured at a point. There's, like, they're playing around with, is he gonna die? And I'm like, oh, of course he's not gonna die, right? And then, like I expected, he like comes back, has that second wind. I'm like, oh, he's fine now. And then he gets injured again. I'm like, oh, the fuck, they're gonna do the same thing. That's kind of lazy. And then he dies. And even after he died, I'm like, oh, they're gonna bring him back. Like, oh, I didn't actually die. He'll secretly still be alive somehow. But no, they followed through with it. I think that episode, like, it was a really, really big decision that kind of flipped the show on its head, right? Because to that point, I'd say, like, for the most part, the show's tone is very rather upbeat, right? Like, there's certainly some kind of somber moments, obviously, with like Kamina finding his dad and certain bits and pieces like that, but it really set up the show to be something, and then throws, like, episode 8 is basically the spanner in the works, right? It sets up like a Yoko Kamina relationship. In the same episode, they kill him off. Simone, by this point of the series, had basically gone nowhere as well. Like, he was slowly getting more and more confident, right? But it's not like he was at a point where he didn't need Kamina anymore. Oh, no. It didn't make sense for Kamina. It's not like Kamina had provided his value to Simone and he could disappear from the show. Like, no. It felt premature, and it felt like Kamina was taken out of the show too soon, and he still had so much more to offer in terms of like he himself could have had some development, right? So the fact that it was so unexpected and premature kind of worked for like this shocking nature. Generally, I'm not a big fan of like shocks for the sake of it, but I think this really worked, and that's probably the reason why like episode 8 is my favorite of the entire series.
For sure, for sure. I will say, I agree with you. Yeah, episode 8 is one of those that the first time I was watching it, I never in a million years would have thought that they would kill, fucking Kamina. I remember that at this point of the series, I was thinking to myself, fucking hell, he should be the protagonist, Like,
Did you cry?
I think I did shed a tear, get watery eyes, but the only series that has still made me cry was Anohana.
Yeah.
That's still the one and only. But I will say I did tear up, I think, the first time I saw it. And sometimes, especially later on in the series when they do a lot of callbacks to everyone in the cast, he has such an impression on them that they all try to like do his pose, or they'll reminisce on things that he said. And even at the end, his memory breaks them all out of the anti-spiral multi-dimensional labyrinth. I know that sounds like fucking word salad, but that's something that really happens in the show. And I also really like how, in the last episode, the main villain says, like, it's not the last episode, surprisingly not my favorite, but one of the highlights of that will always and forever be the impossible, sentient beings can't break out of a labyrinth. He goes into like some technical, and Simon just, we don't care about time or space or multi-dimensional whatevers.
That line was pretty good, yeah.
I'm like, bro, they don't even know what they're throwing at them, and they don't care.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I really liked too how they handled Kamina's death in terms of like just the way they went about it with the music completely drains out. All you have is like the rain. It goes black and white, I think, as well, and you have like the rain on the mecha. It's very stimulating visual imagery that's quite powerful for that moment. And I appreciate how they handled that.
My bad. Did you also notice that the rain that fell on Lagann's face made her look like it was also crying?
Yeah.
I really like the image that strikes me the most of that ending of that episode was him sitting in the cockpit bloody with a smile on his face, and Simon, he looks like he's pounding the ground screaming, but you don't hear it. It's just the rain.
It's just numb. And makes you feel numb.
Yeah. They narrate that they lost something that can't be replaced before.
Yeah.
It just cuts to black. And I feel like they should have let the episode credits, because then when it goes into the like the happy guitar, I'm like, let it sink, come on. But what you gonna do?
But I think that was perfect execution, and that for me was probably one of the main reasons why episode 8 was my favorite. But what about yourself? What's your favorite episode of Gurren Lagann?
I think, in my opinion, the most well-rounded favorite episode is 15. I Will Head Towards Tomorrow, where they finally attack the capital Tepelin and fight King Lorgenum.
Yeah, that's when he dies, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the end of like Act 2, right? Like episode 8's kind of like the finale of the first
end of Act 2, Part 1. Yeah. Before pre-time skip. Like, it's kind of like a build-up, right? Because it was a whole fucking pain in the ass to even get there, right? There's 4 generals. There's like a whole tornado thing they had to get through.
Yeah.
And like they finally gathered. yeah, really. But I love the way they gather up the army, and how it's kind of like chess. They're sacrificing pieces on purpose to get to him. You know how they sacrifice the mothership, the Daiguren?
Yeah.
Like, they use it to cut through the knife, and they blow up the missiles to get through the hammer. Then they go through to send one mecha into like... I love those like tactics. They kind of set it up early. Oh, there's another Lagann inside of the building. The final, Viral's final appearance in Part 1, where he gets immortality and he just gets his ass beat, and he's like, oh, why can't I beat him? And Spiral King says, oh, I didn't give you immortality so that you could like beat Simon. I gave you immortality so that you can witness me destroy him and tell the story down for generations. I'm like, whoa, that's fucking raw, dude. Like, that's so cool. And just, the Lazengan has one of the most badass, I think the most badass mech design in the entire show. It's just like, same versus same kind of style. And the ending with Simon getting his ass beat out of his own mech and managing to kill him with the little spiral drill necklace that he uses. Nothing has ever hyped me up like my first time on, obviously besides the final battle in space. But this one was definitely my favorite episode because it's so well rounded, and it ends on such a good happy note before it all falls to shit. I feel like they could have ended it there if they really wanted to.
It's definitely
but
like
you
the
can
peak of
tell.
the show, right? I think this episode is like the peak, and then we kind of have that like falling action for the next few episodes where the show tries to find its feet again, and then we ramp back up for like another peak with that finale.
Yeah, and I think that was done very well because up until this point, there you can tell there's so much more that they want to bring out with like the anti-spirals and how they set up the little teaser with the people at the end, the number of people. He says, what is it, like 1,000,000 monkeys on Earth and the moon will fall? Just something so vague that, on top of the victory, leaves you wondering like, what's he on about? What does that mean?
Kind of feels like an end of a season, right?
Yeah, well, it's the end of the part one, so it definitely was a great point.
Yeah, I think episode 8, 15, and then the last one, 27, they're probably the 3 strongest episodes. And
agreed,
yeah,
100%.
Probably like most fans would have one of them as one of their favorites. But yeah, let's move on to our final verdict. So I probably already know what you're going to give this out of 100. But for the viewers at home, what would you rate Gurren Lagann out of 100?
Out of 100, 110. It breaks the limits and goes even further beyond.
Wow.
It's a show that takes no shits. It gives no fucks. It breaks a lot of the rules and conventions. It has a lot of music that says, fight the power, fight it all. Like, we don't care about logic. So I think the score should represent that as well. Fuck the logic, fuck that ceiling. 110.
That's fair. What makes it, like, what really stands out about Gurren Lagann compared to, like, everything else you've watched that makes it your number one favorite anime of all time?
I wouldn't say it's my number one of all time. It's definitely top 3. My favorites rotate first place quite often, but it's definitely up there, and they will never come down. And it's just the way it makes me feel, as you said. Like, I understand that that the logic isn't quite there, and a lot of it is pretty ridiculous. But that emotion, whenever I'm feeling down, whenever I'm going through a rough patch in my life, anytime I'm going through one of those stints, I can put on, Gurren Lagann and go for another rewatch, and I'll tell you what, I'll always feel like I can believe in myself a little more. I'll always feel like that thing I thought was impossible, suddenly doesn't feel so much anymore. It always makes me, happy, to find my fighting spirit somewhere deep within me and make the impossible happen and push myself. And to me, that's something that I don't get from a lot of other shows. And, just the value and the beauty of the human spirit and the reflection of this piece of art, and the way you can tell how much they believe in themselves and the absolute fucking confidence to put this show out and say, we don't care about logic, we don't care about any of it. Humans will conquer any challenge that comes their way from the stars, and will break through all those ceilings. It's the themes and all of the story is absolutely wonderful. For me personally, it makes me tear up with joy, and it's a wonderful anime that I will always have a special place in my heart.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you. Like, I think this show is a show that if you connect with it, that's really what makes you love it, right? It's that connection. It's not necessarily like individual aspects, but it's more so like the sum of its parts and how it makes you feel, rather than being able to pinpoint like certain reasons why you love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, my final verdict for Gurren Lagann, look, this might disappoint you somewhat, but I'm going to give it a 60 out of 100. For me, it's just slightly above average. Like, I've kind of already discussed, like, my criticisms with it, but I'll start with the things I like. I love the originality. Yeah, it's definitely, like, I haven't seen anything else like this before, which is kind of rare because I've seen a lot of stuff, but kind of delving into anime, it's definitely a very unique show, right? It's got unique decisions with, like, killing off one of the lead characters so early on. Very bold and brave, a huge 7-year time skip kind of in the middle. It's a concise show, right? I do like how much it milks out of just its 27 episodes. There's not a ton of filler arcs, if I'm being honest, which anime is kind of notorious for. I like the themes a lot. I think thematically it's extremely strong, particularly like Simone's character as well and the arc that he undergoes. The score and animation are both solid too. Like, technically it's a very like well-made show. You can tell that like so much fucking passion went into this, right? Even though I'm not like the biggest fan, it oozes passion from its creators, and you can tell like the people who were a part of making this just had a fucking amazing time, right? And it really seeps through into the show. So I totally understand all of those aspects, but For me, what holds it back is, like I was saying, a lot of the action sequences just don't work for me. I like more grounded, realistic action, and seeing like a lot of the Deus Ex Machina moments where characters are in situations where, and they just kind of get out of them with like the will to fight harder or confidence or turning the drill didn't quite land for me. A lot of cool action sequences as well, like, don't get me wrong, but for me, I did find that kind of like logic flaw to be a bit of a hurdle that I couldn't quite overcome. I wasn't a big fan of a lot of the characters. Outside of Simone's character, I think they're all pretty underdeveloped, and a lot of people like to say that they're very lovable characters. They're likable in a sense that, they're easygoing, but there's not really much to them, right? Like, they don't really undergo a lot of development, and for me, I'm very big on character. Like, character is one of the most important things, especially in television, like, even more so than, like, feature films. Television, I'm all about character, and for me, like, a lot of the minor characters, like, you take Simone out of the show, it's nothing, right? Like, he carries the show on his back, because a lot of those like side characters just aren't overly engaging to me. And yeah, so for that reason, it lands at a 60 out of 100. It's solid. I enjoyed watching it. There's definitely some killer episodes, and I'll remember a lot of like those awesome moments as well. But for me personally, I didn't quite connect with this like as much as other people have, and for me, that's probably one of the main reasons why I didn't like it quite as much as other people. And I'll say, like, it continues the streak of me not quite falling in love with an anime as of yet, right? There is still hope in the future, but as it stands right now, I am yet to watch an anime that really, like, connects with me across the board.
And hey, that's fair enough. Honestly, though, you should have given the show at least 9 more points for the meme score, man. Come on. But I get that, and I'm glad that you're willing to give these shows that aren't normally a part of the things that you watch shots, because it broadens your horizons, and it opens up perspective to different opinions, and I think it's really cool that you're willing to go into that. And I'm excited, and I look forward to maybe watching more shows, recommending and watching more shows that are anime, and hopefully at some point we'll find one that really grabs you and turns you into a complete fucking weeb.
Oh god,
so,
I hope not. But yeah, just for the record too, like, I don't think Gurren Lagann is a bad show. Like, 60 out of 100 is, a kind of mediocre, slightly above average rating. I just think that it's a show that didn't overly connect with me. It wasn't really befitting of my tastes. But I can see how someone like yourself that is into this kind of style could really love it.
For sure.
Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This has been our podcast of Gurren Lagann. Have you seen the show? I hope so, because we discussed a lot of spoilers. Let us know in the comment section. What's your favorite episode? What's your favorite character? What did you think of the podcast? Love to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you so much, Axl, for joining me on this one.
Of course.
This has been For the Record. Thanks for watching.
Will For the Record ever find an anime that he likes? Find out on the next dramatic episode of For the Record podcast.
That's a perfect ending.